in the smoke of a fractured land, where brother turned on brother's hand, a quiet man with steady eyes would rise, where broken nations lie. From western posts and humble rank, to rivers red and battle banks, he'd carve a path through blood and flame, and history would speak his name. The drums of war began to roll, and fate would call upon his soul, not crowned by birth or gilded art, but iron will and heavier heart. In a world that split like shattered stone, he walked the line and stood alone, and every mile of suffering would shape the man the war would bring. From Ohio fields where youth was born, through West Point halls of pride and scorn, he learned to ride, to watch, to wait, and meet the weight of coming fate. They called him quiet, slow to speak, but steel was hidden underneath. When thunder cracked in '61, the Civil War had just begun. He set aside a farmer's life, returned to serve a nation's strife. No grand ambition in his chest, just duty burning in his rest. But rivers soon would know his tread, where Union hopes and steel were led. He took the West with patient hand and pushed rebellion from the land. Henry fell beneath this plan, and Donaldson, unconditional man. The words he spoke would shake the air and echo bold without despair. Through Tennessee and icy mud, he moved through fire, iron and blood. At Shiloh's field where chaos roared, he stood though thousands lay ignored. The world would call it brutal cost, but Grant would never count what's lost. For every wound and broken line, he saw a path through endless time. Then Vicksburg rose upon the hill, a fortress proud, defiant still, until the siege of iron might broke hunger into Union light. The river split, the South was torn, a nation bruised but not yet worn. And through the smoke he would not bend, not break, not falter at the end. While others hesitated there, he pressed forward through despair. Oh, I, the man who would not yield, I walked through blood across the field. At Appomattox I stood still, to bend the world to iron will. Unconditional, I made it known, the war would end where I had grown. I faced Lee's line and held my ground, and brought the silence crashing down. I ended fire, I closed the flame, and history would know my name. Then east to face the hardened Lee, through wilderness and agony, where forests burned and men dissolved into the smoke of endless resolve. Spotsylvania's bloody earth drank deep the cost of human worth, yet still he pressed, refused to fall, while grinding war consumed them all. At Cold Harbor's fatal hour, he bore the weight of brutal power. No turning back, no softened road, he carried war's unbearable load. Across the James the siege began, where Petersburg would test the man. Each mile a scar, each day a storm, yet still he held the Union's form. Through trenches long as sleepless years, through cannon fire and choking fears, he wore the patience of the worn. Through every death and every dawn, until at last in Appomattox court the final flag of war was brought. Lee surrendered folded steel, and time itself began to heal. Grant stood silent, gave no cheer, just ended years of blood and fear. No triumph carved in bitter pride, just peace returning hard-won tide. The war was over, smoke would clear, and Union dawn would reappear. And in that quiet after fight, he laid the sword down into night. A soldier shaped by endless cost, who knew exactly what was lost. So I stood where the river breaks, through endless siege and burning stakes. At Vicksburg's walls I held the line, and starved the pride of rebel time. Unconditional, I would not fall. I pressed my hand against the wall. Through mud and fire I carved my way, and broke the South in blue-gray day. I split the land, I claimed the stream, and made the Union's broken dream. And after war the world would turn as cities healed and embers burned. He walked beyond the sword and gun to see what peace had just begun. A soldier, leader, forged in flame, and history remembers Grant's name.